The first sign wasn't a sound. It was the silence. Birdsong vanished, winds stilled, oceans calmed. Across Earth, millions tilted their heads skyward as shadows blanketed cities in midday light. Above, the sky fractured, not from thunderclouds but from something worse. Enormous vessels descended, blacker than space itself, gliding silently through the atmosphere. To those below, they looked like floating mountains, angular, expressionless, and impossibly vast. From Cairo to Caracas, news feeds exploded, unidentified. Objects in low orbit, no contact attempted. But Earth's leaders already knew the enemy wasn't unknown. They were expected. They were the Zarkai, a war-born empire that had ground half the Orion arm into dust. Technologically advanced, merciless, and impossibly arrogant, they viewed other species as livestock to be herded or erased, and now they'd found Earth. Inside the Zarkai flagship Voraktal, Grand Marshal Krix paced before his command dais, his eyes, jet-black vertical-slitted, glowing with amusement. Around him, his sub-commanders barked in their guttural native tongue. "Preparing for a swift decapitation strike. This is the infestation?" Krix sneered, eyeing the rotating projection of Earth. "No orbital defense grid, no shield arrays, no kinetic barriers. These humans don't even have lunar colonies." "They have nuclear warheads," one underling muttered. Krix waved a clawed hand. "Spears thrown at stars, primitive toys. This will be over in a cycle." Then the signal came. It wasn't a transmission of surrender or even panic. It was a deliberate global broadcast. Every satellite frequency hijacked. Every screen on Earth, from pocket phones to stadium jumbotrons, flickered to life with a single image, black and white footage, a trench, mud, screams, gunfire echoing like thunder, soldiers. Human soldiers, emerging from smoke, broken, bloody, and still charging. One man clutches a rifle in trembling hands, his gas mask cracked. He bayonets an enemy soldier through the gut and keeps running. Another clip, a mushroom cloud, rising over a ruined city. Children with burned skin, sirens, then Normandy, then Vietnam, then Sarajevo, then Fallujah. No narration, just war. Endless, brutal, human war. Krix leaned forward. "What is this?" An intelligence officer clicked away on a console. "It's a data burst. Origin. Coordinated Terrestrial Relay Systems. Title header, 'This is our history.' Subtitles in Galactic Standard." The footage didn't stop. Every military conflict in human history, centuries of it, poured into the stars, onto Zarkai monitors, filling the sky with a past soaked in fire and blood. And the humans, they had sent it willingly. Back on Earth, President Elena Morse stood in a hardened command bunker 300 meters beneath Colorado. Around her, generals and defense ministers from a dozen nations stared at the war footage in grim silence. "Will they understand?" a Japanese admiral asked. "They're conquerors," Morse replied. "They'll think we're monsters. But they'll also know we've done this dance before, many times, and we always outlive the music." She turned to her aide. "Prepare the next upload. Guerrilla Warfare Doctrine translated." Above, in orbit, Grand Marshal Krix clenched his jaw. "What are they trying to prove?" "They're showing us their history," one technician said, voice low. "They're not warning us off. They're telling us who we're dealing with." "And who are they?" Krix snapped. The screen shifted again. Footage of a man, tattered and bleeding, crawling through no man's land to drag his wounded comrade to safety. Of a pilot with one engine burning, refusing to eject as he steered his plane into an enemy cruiser. Of a city rebuilding after atomic fire. No captions, no context. Just raw, unfiltered resilience. "They are a species that survives war, Grand Marshal," the technician whispered. "Even when they lose, they come back harder." Crick stepped closer to the screen. One final clip played, a field of tombstones, thousands of them, as far as the eye could see. A child, no older than 7, placed a red flower at the base of 1. The camera slowly pulled back to reveal the epitaph, "Never again." But beneath it, someone had carved another phrase. "But if necessary, again," Crix snarled. "Prepare orbital strikes. I want their command centers gone within the hour." And yet, even as orders barked and targeting arrays lit up, a flicker of hesitation passed through the bridge crew, because in the hearts of warriors, true warriors, recognition stirs before fear. And in that moment, the Zarkai realized something chilling. They hadn't found prey. They'd found survivors. The Zarkai expected chaos. They got quiet. Drop pods screamed through the stratosphere, 1,000 obsidian spears hurled toward Earth. Their impact cratered highways, shattered buildings, and boiled lakes. Troopers emerged, 8-limbed, armor-plated. Monstrosities bred for siege warfare, their talons thirsty for conquest. But there was no one to conquer. No soldiers met them on the ground. No drones screamed through the skies. No civilians ran screaming from homes. Earth's megacities, New York, Mumbai, Tokyo, Lagos, stood tall and empty. "Recon units, spread out," Commander Varn hissed, his voice like grinding bone. "Scan for life signatures. This is deception. It must be." He stepped through the heart of Paris. Eiffel Tower untouched. Bistros abandoned mid-meal, wine still half poured into glasses. A violin lay in the street, bow across its strings, silent. The humans had vanished, but Earth was still watching. Above, the broadcast changed. No longer was it only war footage. Now it was something else, something more intimate. Body cams, troopers from history, human soldiers breathing hard, bleeding, gasping, crying, voices shouting over radio static, "We're surrounded! We hold this line or we all die." For home, for family, for those who never came back. Every screen in the Zarkai fleet now bore witness, not to tactics, but to will. On board the Devourer, Grand Marshal Crix watched a clip of a young woman crawling through a collapsed building, her hands raw, trying to reach a trapped child. Bombs fell in the distance, the sky pulsing with fire. "She's not a soldier," his aide whispered. "This one was a nurse." The next clip, a man on a rooftop holding a flare as evac helicopters approached, even as enemy artillery zeroed in. He didn't run. He guided them in, died standing. These weren't warriors. They were people, and somehow they had all fought, like legends. In Berlin's underground rail tunnels, the Zarkai advanced, formation tight, weapons raised. Every footstep echoed in darkness. Then, click, lights flickered on. Not fluorescents, projectors. The concrete wall erupted with images, grainy videos of urban ambushes, insurgents luring tanks into alleyways, civilians faking surrender before detonating explosives, entire cities turned into labyrinths of traps. A speaker crackled to life. "We've studied war longer than you've studied flight. We don't need lasers to beat you. We only need time, and space, and memory." Boom, the first Zarkai patrol disappeared in a fireball. The second unit stumbled back. Then the floor collapsed beneath them, dropping them into a metro tunnel filled with flames and barbed wire. Screams echoed, not of terror, but of realization. They weren't invading a planet. They were walking into a simulation, a living museum of human warfare. And the humans had rigged every exhibit. Elsewhere, Commander Thrax strode into the ruins of Johannesburg, scanning the skyline. His warriors fanned out across rooftops. "Thermal scans, no heat signatures," one soldier hissed. Then a nearby drone pinged. Movement. A lone figure, standing on a high-rise rooftop. Zoom in. A human man, face painted, standing shirtless in the sun. He held a long spear, primitive wood and metal, tattoos etched across his chest in tribal patterns. He didn't move, just watched. Thrax growled, "A primitive mockery." He raised his arm to order a strike. The rooftop exploded. Not from Zarkai weapons, from beneath. The figure had been a hologram. The building? A trap. The explosion collapsed the entire block, taking 2 Zarkai dropships with it. As the dust settled, the air filled with human radio chatter, recorded, not live. We learned from Sun Tzu, then from Genghis, then from ourselves. You walk into our wars like tourists, but tourists don't survive when the exhibits shoot back. On board the Devourer, Admiral Crick slammed his fist into the display panel, shattering the glass. "They're not fighting us!" "They are," his second-in-command murmured. "Just not with soldiers, with ghosts." And above it all, Earth kept broadcasting. The feed turned again. Now came the wars Earth lost, the Alamo, the fall of Singapore, Custer's last stand, mass, graves, surrenders, starving soldiers in frozen trenches, every failure, every humiliation deliberately shown. To most, it would look like weakness. But to a warrior, it was a message. Even when we fall, we remember. And memory is the deadliest weapon of all. The Zarkai had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had never been hunted before. By the 3rd planetary cycle, their invasion had stalled. Not because of overwhelming firepower, but because of nothing. No enemy formations, no fleet resistance, no command structures to destroy, and yet every step deeper into Earth felt like sinking into a trap carved by ghosts. Commander Varn's platoon was pinned down inside what humans once called Warsaw. His soldiers, battle-tested veterans of the Velkarn incursions, had been reduced to half strength in less than an hour. No enemy, no return fire, just the city itself turning against them. "They've rigged every building," Varn snarled, blood trickling down his jaw. "Explosives in the walls, collapsing stairwells, pressure plates where furniture should be." A plasma burst erupted behind him, Private Zekta screaming as she was dragged into a rubble-filled crevice, her armor crushed by a shifting floor. Her body never reappeared, a whisper on the local net. "That building's from 1943. Humans have been perfecting urban traps longer than we've had spaceflight. You're not fighting soldiers, you're fighting ideas." Up in orbit, Grand Marshal Crix had had enough. "Deploy air pulse sterilization drones," he ordered. "If they hide in ruins, we erase the ruins. Armored drones the size of shuttles." Dropped from orbit, emitting sonic pulses that liquefied organic tissue and detonated fuel pockets. Entire blocks of old Tokyo were erased in one sweep. Cape Town cracked like dry earth. Still no counterattack. Still only silence. But then came the new feed. Not war footage this time. Blueprints. From ancient castles to Cold War bunkers, from guerrilla field camps to tunnel networks beneath Saigon, Earth's broadcast now shifted to diagrams, floor plans, construction, data. "You sterilized the surface," the human voice said over the feed. Calm, almost clinical. "We learned long ago to build beneath it." The drones began disappearing, one by one. Not shot down, not hacked, vanished. Then came the chilling visual, a drone's final footage, broadcast directly into the Zarkai fleet's central ops bay. The drone's thermal view showed dozens of heat blooms erupting from what appeared to be a forested patch of Siberia. But when its sensors tried to map the source, nothing, just cold ground, rock, then a voice, human, raspy. "You dropped onto a museum of violence. We are the curators. And you're just another exhibit waiting for a plaque." Commander Thrax's battalion made it as far as the outskirts of Chicago. What they found there was worse than resistance. It was anticipation. Mines set not in random patterns, but along historically strategic paths, choke points, ambush zones, sniper lines. Each explosive felt personal, and every trap was labeled. In galactic standard, little tags attached to shrapnel bursts and spring-loaded spikes used in the siege of Leningrad, inspired by Viet Cong tunnel defense, designed by Polish. Resistance 1944. "They're mocking us," one Zarkai soldier muttered, his voice shaking. "No," Thrak said, staring at a crude but effective grenade trap. "They're teaching us." At Uro 300 UTC, the humans finally spoke again. All across the globe, the same voice returned to the Zarkai frequency bands. Male, calm, steady. "You believed history was weakness, that our age of war had ended, that we'd grown soft with peace. But you misunderstand what peace means to humans. It means we have time to sharpen old blades, on cue, every holographic display on Earth, every abandoned screen, billboard, and drone feed shifted to the same image. An old man, sitting alone in a war museum. He stood slowly, looking into the camera with eyes that had seen fire. Behind him, shelves lined with helmets, weapons, and medals. "I've buried friends on 6 continents," he said. "Peace didn't make us forget. It gave us time to remember everything you weren't ready for." He walked past tanks, planes, and blood-stained flags. "You came for war," the old man said. "We answered with history. Now learn your lesson." In orbit, Grand Marshal, Crix stood still. Tactical feeds showed over 300 Zarkai units missing. Drop pod command nodes severed. Atmosphere jamming in 5 regions. No confirmed human casualties. Crix's claws trembled. "They're using the past as a weapon." "No," whispered Arnox. "They are the weapon, and the past is just the trigger." The Zarkai were not afraid of humans. They were afraid of unpredictability, and humans had become completely unpredictable. By day 4, Earth no longer looked like a passive, unarmed world. It felt like a puzzle box with teeth. Entire Zarkai. Battalions had been swallowed by forests that walked, deserts that detonated, and cities where history itself fought back. Now, deep in the American Midwest, the Zarkai 13th Shock Regiment marched across what had once been Kansas wheat fields. Flat, open, perfect terrain for conquest. Commander Zelvarn was confident. His scanners showed no resistance. The winds were still, the soil dry. It was, finally, a break from the cursed traps of the cities. Then they saw it. Stretching across the plains, miles of it, was a single blood-red line, painted directly onto the earth. Not a wall, not a fence, just paint, simple, harmless. Yet every drone that crossed the line went dark. Zelvarn halted the column. "Probes," he growled. They launched micro-drones, shielded and stealthed. Each one crossed the line. Each one vanished. Not destroyed, not jammed, just gone. No signal, no retrieval, like they'd stepped off the edge of the universe. Zelvarn narrowed his eyes. It's psychological warfare. A bluff. He raised a clawed hand. "Cross it." On a rocky outcropping 2 miles away, Major Coulson adjusted his binoculars, watching through a digital scope. He was wrapped in a ghillie suit, unmoving as a stone. Beside him, a young corporal watched the alien troops inch toward the red line. "They're sending in heavies now." "Let 'em," Coulson murmured. "They'll learn." "What if they don't stop?" Coulson smiled grimly. "Then they meet what's under Kansas." The moment the first Zarkai trooper stepped over the red paint, the ground exploded, not with fire, but with sound. Low-frequency, bone-shaking waves erupted from buried speakers, the kind used in psychological warfare zones, designed to disorient, nauseate, and induce panic. Then came the lights, not to blind, but to mimic tracer rounds, flares, and the flicker of World War-era combat zones. And then, the voices. "Hold. The line! They're coming over the hill! Don't let them take the trench!" The alien soldiers froze, confused. The sound wasn't just noise, it was spatial, Each soldier heard screams behind them, gunfire beside them, phantom footsteps in the soil. They were walking through a manufactured hallucination. They fired blindly, missed, panicked, turned on each other. Hidden speakers amplified their own languages. In twisted echoes, "Retreat! You're surrounded. You have no command." The Zarkai formation disintegrated within minutes. Then the earth really opened. From beneath the soil erupted towers. Old Cold War missile silos, retrofitted and reborn. But instead of nukes, they launched kinetic rods. Tungsten spears dropped. From low orbit, untraceable and impossible to intercept. They didn't explode. They punched through the battlefield at Mach 10, each strike like the fist of a vengeful god. The Zarkai survivors tried to flee. Only a handful made it past the red line. And standing just past that line, Major Coulson stepped into view. He wore an old uniform. Not powered armor. Not exoskeletal plating. Just cloth, dust, and history stitched into every patch. He raised a bullhorn. "Welcome to the Red Line. We drew one of these once, 70 years ago, on the 38th parallel. Another in Berlin. One on the beaches of Normandy. Every time we drew one, we meant it." He tossed the bullhorn aside and vanished back into the grass. Back in orbit, Grand Marshal Crix stared at the new tactical map. Entire sectors, offline, regiments, missing. Ground assets, unresponsive. And above the map, in large flashing red, glyphs appeared 3 human words, translated for him, "You were warned." Crix's claws dug into the metal console. "They're bleeding us slowly," whispered his war analyst. "Not defeating us, educating us. Every battle lost is a history lesson they choose to give." Another aide approached, pale. "Sir, our captains. They're refusing to deploy in urban centers." "What?" Crix turned sharply. "They say it feels like being swallowed alive." In the shadows of the Appalachian Mountains, hidden in old NORAD bunkers, Earth's unified command watched the feed in silence. President Morse turned to her generals. "They've taken the bait. They're breaking faster than we hoped." "General," Roth grunted. "Should we give them part 2? Morse nodded. "Time to remind them. We haven't even taught them about resistance movements yet. They thought the traps were bad. Then they met the humans. Not the holograms, not the simulations, not the ghosts of history. The real ones. Zarkai patrols went out in 12s. They came back in 2s, or not at all. In the ruins of Sao Paulo, one squad found their transport shredded. No blast residue, no weapons signature, just wires, simple copper and steel, threaded into the axle housing, connected to a shaped charge made from earth scrap. Low tech, high efficiency, pure malice. In Detroit, motion sensors picked up figures. Moving through the smoke, small, agile, vanishing between buildings like wraiths. Thermal scans showed nothing. But when one patrol finally cornered a shadow, they fired. The body dropped. Just a dummy, straw and a heating element, and while they stared, the rooftop above them collapsed. Grand Marshal Crix had seen insurgencies before. He'd crushed them on iron worlds and acid moons. But Earth? Earth was something else. The resistance wasn't centralized. It wasn't coordinated like a military campaign. It was cultural, primal, inevitable. A captured Zarkai broadcast drone, repurposed by the humans, began pulsing a signal. Every alien device tuned into it involuntarily. Static. Then a voice, female, young, laughing. "This isn't a war anymore. This is a school, you're students. And we're the teachers. Today's lesson, asymmetrical warfare." In a scorched suburb of Beijing, 2 Zarkai shock troops walked down an empty road, hypersensors sweeping. Their armor twitched at the sound of a tinny click-clack-click echoing down an alley. A child's toy, rolling on its own. Wooden wheels, painted red, then music, an old tune, earthfolk melody, scratchy and distant. The soldiers advanced cautiously. The toy exploded, not with fire, but with ink. Black, thick, blinding. Their optics failed instantly. Static burst in their ears, a silhouette darted past them. Then another. No shots fired, just movement, teasing, surrounding. One soldier screamed, the other never got the chance. In rural France, a squad of Zarkai paused outside a vineyard where the grapes were long dead. They heard singing. A man's voice, old, rusted. A war ballad in French, echoing through the mist. They followed it, down the road, into the barn, where they found nothing. Until the doors slammed shut behind them. Locking. Metal grinding. The floor gave way. The pit wasn't deep, but it was lined with spikes, on the wall in crimson human paint. We learned from the Viet Cong. We learned from Afghanistan. We learned from you. Meanwhile, in orbit, Zarkai Command was cracking. Grand Marshal Crix stood at the center of a war room where no one spoke above a whisper anymore. The casualty reports were no longer numerical. They were categorized, missing shattered, reversed loyalties. Yes, one tactician admitted. Some of our own are imitating them now. Splinter tactics, underground cell formations. Crix turned slowly. Our soldiers are learning from the humans. They call it the Earth method. Small unit autonomy, improvised kill zones. Cultural weaponization. Crix's mandibles clicked violently. They were supposed to be extinct in the face of our fire. They're evolving through it, sir, the tactician whispered. They're not breaking. They're training. Back on the ground, deep in the Amazon canopy, Lieutenant Jenna Reeve crouched beside her guerrilla unit. Her camo paint was streaked, rifle silent, boots wrapped in cloth. She gave a nod. 12 figures moved through the trees, each one born from a different culture. A Maasai hunter, a Ukrainian sniper, a Brazilian techie with homemade EMPs. They weren't a military, they were the memory of resistance made flesh. And above them, Zarkai ships began falling from the sky. The humans had hacked the orbital relays, hijacked the signals, spliced in their own war music. Drums, violins, whispers, a building rhythm that made every alien heart tremble. Then came the voice again. You came for war. Now you're learning it's not a game. You fight for conquest. We fight for home. You measure wins. We measure stories. Grand Marshal Crix watched another feed, the burning of his 8th Fleet transport as it was lured into a landing corridor in Nevada. That was actually a canyon filled with ancient SAMs reactivated from human museums. He turned to his war council. No more landing parties. He paused. No more invasions. Another beat. No more illusions. He looked toward Earth. And for the first time, he realized, they had never invaded Earth. They had walked into a living memory, armed only with arrogance. The humans are not fighting back. That was the last report Grand Marshal Crix received before everything fell apart. They weren't fighting back because they were preparing something worse. Orbital Control Station XA-7 hung in the black. Above Earth like a sentry, but tonight it shook. The lights flickered. Sirens howled. Unauthorized uplink breach, screamed the AI core. Source, Earth. Tier 0 signal. Manual hardware injection detected. The officer on duty blinked. Manual? From the surface? That's impossible. Then the speakers came. Alive. Not Zarkai language. English. We told you this wasn't your classroom. Now sit down. Lessons in session. And then the station went dark. Gravity failed. Life support crashed. A silent explosion ruptured the left side docking bay. The Zarkai didn't even know how it happened. But back on Earth, deep in a mountain bunker in Switzerland, Dr. Karima Saeed, former linguist turned cyber warfare architect, removed her headset. She looked up at her team and whispered, "That was the final test. Orbital denial confirmed. Time to flip the board. The humans had stopped defending. They had started teaching, and they used the oldest human subject, revolution. In Cairo, the underground metro systems, once flooded by the Zarkai to choke out refugees, now served a new purpose. Out of the tunnels came columns of resistance fighters, armed with weapons older than the alien starships, Molotovs, pipe bombs, railguns powered by modified car engines. The Zarkai called in aerial support. But when their gunships arrived over the Nile Delta, they were blinded. A swarm of micro-drones, launched from centuries-old shipping crates, created a visual field of static, repeating historical footage of anti-colonial uprisings from every continent. What the Zarkai saw was a nightmare collage of revolutions: Vietnam, Algeria, Ireland, India. What the humans saw was their ancestors rising through the smoke. In the ruined shell of New York, now called the Gray Zone, Zarkai Commandant Tarak led a regiment of siege troops into Lower Manhattan. No resistance, no shots, just broken buildings and silent streets, until the drums began. Boom, 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 echoing off steel and stone as if the bones of the city itself were waking. Then came the flare, red, arcing high, bursting into the shape of a clenched fist. "They know," said Tarak's lieutenant, voice trembling. "Know what?" Tarak hissed. "That we're here." From the subway tunnels, from the alleyways, from the sewers, they rose, not soldiers, citizens, covered in dust and purpose. One wore a firefighter's helmet, another a hijab soaked in oil and ash. A boy, barely 14, held a hand-built coil gun in trembling hands. They opened fire, not to kill, to drive the lesson home. The Zarkai tried to retreat, but the path behind them had vanished, swallowed by debris, cut off by triggered collapses. They weren't in a city anymore. They were in a living siege engine. From orbit, Crix watched his war zones go red. Not with blood, with rebellion. Each report was the same: civilian insurrection, weaponized memory, cultural psychological warfare intensifying. The war analysts were silent. No one understood how humans had coordinated so perfectly across languages, continents, and ruins. But Crix now realized they hadn't coordinated. They had simply remembered. In a forgotten corner of Siberia, Commander Tagrin, the only Zarkai officer still trying to learn from human history, discovered a data core hidden in an old Russian missile base. When he accessed it, a video played, grainy, black and white, a human woman sitting beside a fireplace, wrinkled, calm. She looked into the camera. "If you're watching this, it means you forgot what Earth is," she leaned forward. "We're not a species, we're a story. Every time someone came for us, we gave them a lesson. Not all of them lived long enough to understand it. But we don't teach through mercy." The feed cut to silence. On the wall behind her had been a phrase etched in a dozen languages. "You came to take. We came to remind." As the sun rose over Earth's battle-scarred horizon, something shifted. Zarkai gunships hovered motionless. Troop ships never launched. The invasion paused, because Earth wasn't fighting to survive anymore. Earth was demonstrating, teaching, educating the galaxy what it meant to awaken the sleeping myth. The galaxy watched, silent, eyes fixed on Earth. The war that was supposed to be over in days had become a legend in real time, a story bleeding through data streams and intercepted transmissions. And now, the humans were no longer defending, they were gathering. High above, in Earth's shadowed exosphere, Zarkai dreadnought Sorrowfang floated motionless. Its crew expected an orbital assault, nukes, lasers, kinetic strikes. Instead, the humans launched a file, just one. It arrived as a pulse through the universal comm grid, bypassing Zarkai security protocols entirely, an act previously believed impossible. The title? The Last Human Weapon. Grand Marshal Crick stared at the file, antennae twitching. It wasn't encrypted. It wasn't locked. He opened it, and what he saw terrified him more than 1,000 fleets. The footage began with a black screen. Then came images, not of soldiers, not of guns, but of resistance itself. A man standing before tanks in Tiananmen Square. A woman shielding children during the Blitz. Nelson Mandela walking free. The rubble of Dresden. A protester on fire in Prague, unmoving. Then came Earth's voice. No, single speaker, but a chorus speaking across time. You thought our strength was our numbers, our weapons, our cities. But our weapon is older. You cannot bomb it. You cannot erase it. Because it is in you now. The real weapon is the idea of being human. On the ground, in the steaming ruins of old Osaka, Zarkai troops cornered a resistance cell. They prepared to execute the humans. 5 of them, unarmed, wounded. But one of the humans, a woman with burns across her face, looked up and laughed. Too late, she said. Too late for what? For your minds. She bit down on a tooth cap, a trigger, not a bomb, a signal. The skies changed. Every hijacked satellite turned, every screen flickered, and across every occupied zone, the weapon activated. It wasn't a bomb. It wasn't a virus. It was an idea, a montage of human defiance, curated, broadcast, burned into every sensor, Rosa Parks sitting still, Warsaw uprising soldiers with nothing but pistols, the Berlin Wall falling, the ashes of Hiroshima turned into peace gardens. We do not surrender, the chorus said. We become stories, and stories never die. In occupied Rio de Janeiro, Zarkai officer Vrex tried to crush a rebellion by executing their leader. He broadcast it live to crush morale. But instead, humans showed up in the thousands. Not to fight, to sing. They sang an old Portuguese protest. Song, arm in arm, walking forward, into plasma fire, into shock cannons, into death. The Zarkai could have wiped them out. But the soldiers stopped. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Vrex screamed at them, threatened them, ordered executions. They didn't move, because in that moment, the soldiers understood. They weren't suppressing enemies. They were murdering memory. Back in orbit, Grand Marshal Crix sat alone in his chamber, watching footage after footage of humans not winning, but enduring. They were never trying to defeat us, he said aloud. They were trying to transform us, and they had. Already on the far edges of the Zarkai fleet there were signs, units disobeying orders, commanders resigning, one cruiser even turning its weapons on its own supply ship because they saw what Earth had shown them. It wasn't propaganda. It was a mirror. And now, some of them liked what they saw. At Crucible Ridge in Greenland, the last human command center waited for the counterstrike that never came. No orbital bombardment, no drone swarm. Instead, one signal. We request negotiation. The room fell, silent. Jenna Reeves stood, rifle slung, eyes tired. They're not surrendering, Dr. Karima Saeed nodded. No. They're asking to listen. And on a broken hill in Europe, where old bones slept beneath trenches from 100 years ago, a Zarkai scout team found a plaque. It simply read, "You came for war. You left with a history lesson." The last weapon had already been used. Not a bomb, not a fleet, but a memory, sharpened into revelation. And now the galaxy listened. In orbit, above Earth, the once proud dreadnought Sorrowfang no longer bore Zarkai banners. Its command deck had been dimmed. Its weapons offline. Grand Marshal Crix stood alone, unarmed, on a landing pad beside a delegation pod. Across from him stood Jenna Reeve, in scarred body armor, her rifle slung and boots caked in ash from the wars below. She didn't salute. She didn't bow. She simply asked, "Do you understand now?" Crix looked toward the blue planet beneath them. scarred but spinning still. You made us see what you are. No, Jenna corrected. What you forgot we are. The Galactic Council, once dismissive of Earth's primitive status, now convened in emergency session. Dozens of species argued in their native tongues, their feeds flooded with images from Earth, uprisings, revolts, art carved from rubble, songs sung in bombed-out cathedrals, children dancing in minefields as drones watched, confused. No propaganda, just raw, unfiltered endurance. They don't win with weapons, the Hikari ambassador muttered. They win by surviving in ways we never imagined. The vote was unanimous. Earth was no longer considered primitive. It was to be granted sovereign protected status, not as a mercy, but as a warning. Down on Earth, in the crater where Paris used to be, humans gathered to raise something new. Not a monument, not a weapon, a school. Built from pieces of shattered alien hull and rusted human steel, they named it the Memory Forge. Its first lesson was carved in stone at the entrance. We do not teach through conquest. We teach through survival. On the day the war was officially declared over, a signal was broadcast from Earth to every known system in the galaxy. It was not a threat, not a demand, a recording, an old voice, cracking, patient, a grandmother speaking softly to the stars. You came for war. You brought your fleets, your arrogance, your ignorance. You thought our history was dead, that we'd forgotten how to suffer and still stand. But pain built our bones. Memory is in our blood. And when the last flag falls and the fire dies out, what remains is who we chose to be. This is what it means to be human. We don't survive despite our wounds. We survive because of them. In deep space, a Zarkai youth, barely old enough to wear the uniform, watched the recording with shaking hands. He looked at his father, a retired officer who once led a strike on Buenos Aires. Were they monsters? The boy asked. His father shook his head. No, son. They were mirrors. We just didn't like what they showed us. Decades passed. The war became legend. The legend became curriculum. Across the galaxy, schools began teaching the Earth conflict not as a conquest, but as a cautionary tale. Students studied the fall of New York, not as a battle, but as a metaphor. They analyzed the weapon that wasn't a weapon as a case study in cultural resistance. They read human poetry alongside military doctrine, and at the heart of every lesson was the same truth. You can break their cities, but you will never break their story. Years later, an alien expedition landed on Earth, not as conquerors, but as scholars. They toured the rebuilt cities. They visited graves. They were guided not by generals, but by children. One young human girl pointed at a statue of an old woman wrapped in both a keffiyeh and a flannel coat. Who was she? A Hikari diplomat asked. She wrote songs during the war, the girl replied. She never held a gun, but her voice made soldiers drop theirs. Was she a warrior? The girl smiled. No, she was a reminder. In the end, Earth didn't just survive, it educated. The cost was oceans of blood. The price was pain buried beneath centuries, but the result was clear. The next time someone came looking for war, the galaxy would remember Earth wasn't just defended, it was understood.